Good morning, top of the morning to you. I was asked a few years back, after spending 40 years in the futures industry, exposed to the futures industries of different contracts, to come over and give a talk to some graduating business school students. And I went through over an hour presentation of talking about the methods, the different contracts, all of the aspects about futures markets to educate them. And as a very receptive group, I was quite surprised, quite frankly, at the end of the talk about the quality of questions. Very intelligent group. But there was one young man that stood up in the back, raised his hand and said, "Mr. Hauser, you've been all over the world. Tell us the location of the richest untapped resources. Would it be the diamond mines in South Africa? Or what about the platinum mines in Russia, largest exporter of platinum in the world? And of course, we mustn't forget about our coal fields in Pennsylvania, should we?" I said, all of those are worthy candidates, but they're nowhere close. The richest untapped resources are the graveyards, the cemeteries throughout the planet. People born with their natural talents and abilities, pearls that were never used. And to me, this is like living behind invisible bars. Well, as we study the lives of great men and women, we come to realize that some of their most progressive moments were during those setbacks. We come to realize that every single endeavor is going to have some setbacks. Are you utilizing all of the pearls, all the assets that you've been given? No, most people are not. I talked to one of my great mentors. His name was Mort Utley, who helped build Jefferson National Life Insurance Company in Indianapolis, Indiana. And he was the keynote speaker at the Southwestern Company, in which I was in the book business when I was in college, which I'll tell you about in another presentation. Well, I talked and talked and talked to him because he was living in Phoenix and I was living in Phoenix. And I had received some awards. My fourth and fifth year in the book business, I happened to be number one salesman out of 7,200 students. So he knew who I was, and I knew who he was because he was a keynote speaker. Well, I talked and talked and talked to him, but then one thing that stands out that I'll never forget, and he said, "Doug," and Doug is my middle name, which my friends, close friends call me. He said, "If you ever find a job or a career that you love so much, you do it for nothing, but yet you do it so well, people want you bad enough to pay you to do it." He said, "You found your niche in life." And he said, unfortunately, only 4% of the working population ever finds their niche in life. I use the example a lot of times in asking someone about their profession. If you had $30 million set aside in the bank, liquid assets, would you be willing to do the job that you're doing now for nothing? Show up 5 minutes early and stay 5 minutes late. Most people, being honest, would say no, they wouldn't. Well, I asked my dad, after 45 years working as a mechanical engineer, obtaining his wonderful degree from a major university here in Texas, I asked him, did he enjoy his job, his profession? And he said he hated it. He hated the profession, he hated the job. And he worked for 6 great companies: Boeing Aircraft, Brown and Root, Dow Chemical, Vicol Corporation, on and on. Well, to me, that's like living behind invisible bars. Why is it that people don't pursue or haven't pursued the gifts that they've been given? Well, there's many reasons. One could be the bad upbringing in a home life. Certainly raising children is a lot different than what we might have expected, and many challenges that we didn't know about. Getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning, changing baby formula and diapers is not something that anyone told us, or most people haven't told us beforehand. Well, it can be very challenging, but if the love is there, then we make it through and do the best that can be done. Many times, being bullied at school. Oh, you can't do that. Ralph tried that and he never was successful. You can't either. And of course, there's a sign on everyone's back, make me feel important. A very important public speaker once said that in his speeches. Well, in order to feel important and feel acceptable, we got to follow the crowd, or at least that's the mentality of those that do. Well, life goes on, and many times we start something on our own and we fail, and we think of ourselves as a failure. We don't realize, or haven't realized, that when we study the lives of great men and women, some of their darkest hours is where they gain the most. They capitalize on the mistakes. And the way you do this is simply make a list of the things that might have gone wrong and why they went wrong. And you learn from those mistakes. You have to separate yourself as an individual from the action that was committed. And it was only the circumstances. It wasn't you, the person, forever. You are one of 7.6 billion people on the planet, and nobody is quite like you. You have the qualities separate than anyone else. But now, how do you find these qualities, and how do you develop a successful career? Well, first of all, you got to have a purpose. A purpose has to be unattached necessarily from material, like making house payments or car payments or sending kids through school. Yes, those are very important, absolutely. But the purpose has to be an emotional feat. And I have come to realize in my businesses that adding value to the lives of other people is the greatest source of happiness. You help the old lady across the street, and she looks at you with loving eyes and say, "What can I do for you?" Well, there's not anything necessary you're going to ask of her, but the fact that you did that makes you feel good about yourself and also having done it. And the purpose has to be there. Now, once you have the purpose established, then you establish goals, places of destiny that you want to have. And this is one of the setbacks of many of us. We don't have an outline. We don't have a destiny. We don't have a roadmap to success. We only go to work every day and do what we're told and do what's expected, hopefully. But that's not the way to get and achieve goals. And so when we establish goals and destinies in mind, we come to realize that our reach should always be further than our grasp, and that attitude is more important than altitude in life. It is responsible for our altitude, but attitude, not aptitude, is responsible. And that's something we have to live with and learn from experience. Well, all through life, we come to realize that after setting a purpose, setting goals, you have to put it into action, because motivation is more important than talent. Talent is almost unrewarded talent is a byword, is a quote that we'll all come to realize someday. Plenty of people with talent, but yet we don't get much accomplished if we're not motivated. Well, all through life, we come to see great superstars. Billie Jean King, we know as a great tennis player, and she achieved great success with 39 Grand Slams, 12 singles, and 16 world doubles. Nobody was laughing at her like they had when she was in school and told them that she was going to be a great tennis star someday. They said, "You're 50 pounds overweight. You're not going to be a tennis star." Well, after her achievements, there was no question about her value to the tennis industry. And all through life, we see this. I know that reminds me of the little girl that was born 60 miles southeast of Nashville. It was 1940, and she was one of 22 kids that the dad had sired through 2 wives. She was number 20. Well, everything was just fine until 4 years old, she developed scarlet fever and polio. Polio was a real scourge back in the 40s before Dr. Salk invented that vaccine. Well, she had polio, and her mother started taking her to a doctor on a regular 6-month visits. Well, the doctor told her on the first one, and he put braces on her, and he told her that you'll never be able to walk as a normal person. You'll always have these braces, and we'll change the size of them as your legs and as you grow. Well, she looked at her mother, and her mother gave a confident smile, one that instilled an aspiration. And so at night, what nobody really knew in her family, that at night, every night, she would get up and everybody had gone to sleep, and she would walk 2 hours in her room, holding furniture, leaning on furniture, holding her up. And as she walked and walked. And eventually, by the time she was 9 years old, she was able to throw off the braces and walk. Well, the next visit to the doctor's office, she took off the braces and walked around his office. Well, he nearly had a heart attack. He'd never seen such a recovery. Well, she went on to try out for the volleyball team at school in junior high, and she didn't make it. One day she was walking home, and she saw in the track field athletes competing out there, and they were having such a great time, slapping each other on the back, laughing, roaring, and having such a tremendous time. Well, she wanted to go out for the track team, so she went out for the track team, and made a long story short, she won several different events, became very fast at her profession, and she actually qualified for the 1960 Olympics in Rome. She won 3 gold medals, which was more than anybody had ever won at that point. Yes, Wilma Rudolph had burnt her name into the history books, never to be removed. And she did it because she had a dream, and she followed through on that dream. Yes, we learned that every setback is a setup for a greater comeback. You can't take them personally to knock yourself down and still achieve. So many do not have the roadmap that they need. They need a plan. They need a purpose. They need the goals and a plan of action. Well, the architect of the universe didn't build a stairway leading to nowhere for your life. And the greatest teacher of them all, the carpenter from the plains of Galilee, told us a secret time and time again. He said to ask, and you shall receive. He said to seek, and you shall find. He said to knock, and the door shall be open unto you. He said, but you must ask, seek, and knock. Notice that. It's not your mother, dad, or your best friend, or the company you're working with. It's you and you alone. And that the only chains and shackles that hold any of us back are those that we ourselves forge in the fires of doubt and hammer out on the anvils of lack of belief. And I'll close with one of my favorite little poems. It's called The Fisherman's Prayer. God grant that I may live to fish until my dying day. And when my final cast I've made and life has slipped away, I pray that God's great landing net will catch me in its sweep, and in his infinite mercy, God will judge me big enough to keep. But the real question is, will he judge you big enough to keep? And I want to close by asking you, are you utilizing all of the pearls, all of the gifts that you've been given? Are you at your very best? Or is there a ceiling much higher that you could compete? We all need an outline. We need a course of action. And this is the reason that I wrote the book. After 2 years, The Winning Advantage, Tap into Your Richest Resources. Look up on Amazon and get your copy. And many have gotten more than one copy. Being this close to Christmas, they have gotten 3 to 4 copies because they make nice gifts And certainly for young people, but also for people that are in the profession for 30 years and you know they're unhappy. And so don't hesitate to extend an opportunity for others as well as yourself. Pleasure talking with you. Talk with you next week, Tuesday, 9 o'clock. Use your talents, embrace your abilities, and pick up a copy of my book. Click the link on my website, thewinningadvantage.com, and purchase one of my books on Amazon. See you next week, Tuesday, 9 o'clock.